Hello, my name is Scott Drapo. I'm a senior at St. Martin's University. This is my video essay for my Capstone project. The title of the project is Building a Comprehensive Strength Program Based on Progression from Proper Breathing to Functional Strength Movements. I'm a firm believer in my personal motto, medicine through movement. My paper is a reflection of this philosophy backed by scientific research. Breathing is the most fundamental block of not only athletic performance, but of general physical and mental health. It's something that's so often overlooked that it has such a huge impact on our lives that I made sure it was the first principle of this comprehensive program. We're going to talk about proper bracing techniques as a natural extension of breathing and move on to compound movements. Now, compound movements are at the core of any training modality. The squat, bench, and deadlift recruit multiple muscle groups and can be varied in order to achieve a variety of goals. The movement patterns combined with breathing and bracing create a holistic basis for a proper resistance program. Now, all my references are linked down below in the description, and my paper is also linked. I hope that you read my work and take these lessons into your own life. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about the diaphragm. Diaphragm is a muscle that helps us breathe, and it's located below the lungs and on top of the abdominal cavity. The way that it works is it's just like any other muscle. It flexes and relaxes, so contracts and relaxes. When it contracts, it creates negative pressure within the thoracic cavity, and that allows the oxygen to come in and fill our lungs. And then of course, as it relaxes, that positive pressure comes out and it allows us to do expiration or exhalation. Why is this important for athletic performance? Well, there are lots of what we call accessory muscles that are used in order to breathe more oxygen in. And when we were evolving and needed an extra boost of oxygen and to fill our lungs a little bit more, some of these smaller accessory muscles that are located in the neck that pull on the rib cage or pull on the levator, on the scapula, to allow a little bit more oxygen to be able to be brought in. However, the main driver of inspiration expiration is the diaphragm. As you can see in this diagram here, you can't actually see the diaphragm, it's a cutout, but you see right here in this large reddish spot, that's where the diaphragm would be. It's one of the larger muscles in the body because it has to create so much pressure in order to bring oxygen in. When we talk about proper breathing, what we're talking about is diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is the intentional use of your diaphragm in order to bring oxygen in. Some people call it belly breathing, some people call it deep breathing, and essentially what you are trying to do is use your diaphragm intentionally. So normally it's just working in the background, you don't really think about it until I said something, and now you're thinking about your breathing and it's becoming an active force instead of a passive force. It's taking that active force and taking that mind-muscle connection and allowing you to get to deep breathe effectively. As you can tell, it bisects the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity, and it creates an entire seal around the top of the abdominal cavity. That's the only way that it works. And what we're gonna do now is bring in my assistant, and we are going to talk about what diaphragmatic breathing looks like, as well as what non-diaphragmatic breathing looks like. And then we're going to go over some simple cues that will help you to achieve this, because believe it or not, it is not as easy as just thinking your way through it and trying to do it. Just like any other muscle, it takes practice and it takes a certain amount of dedication in order to achieve and to do well at. And it also takes repetitions. So just like any other strength program, if you're not putting in repetitions, you are not getting better. It's the difference between being able to lift a fork to your mouth and being able to curl a 40-pound dumbbell. You don't get from one point to another in athletic performance without first going through more repetitions and mindful repetitions. Most everybody that is able-bodied is able to lift a fork to their mouth, just like most everybody is able to breathe on their own. However, if you are looking to enhance your life and to enhance athletic performance as well as your mental well-being, as well as your physical well-being, then this has to be something that's intentional. So let's go ahead and bring my assistant in and let's get started. The next thing that we're going to talk about is bracing as far as an extension of breathing. So breathing and diaphragmatic breathing is important because it's oxygenation and for athletic performance. Bracing is the activity of protecting our parts of our body during athletic performance to prevent injuries over the long term. When we talk about bracing, we're talking about two main things: the thoracic spine and the lumbosacral spine. The reason that those two are vulnerable is because they house the spinal cord, and there is no musculature in this area from the bottom of the ribs all the way down to the pelvis that helps stabilize and protect against injuries. It is a cavity, so the abdominal cavity has nothing but organs and soft tissue. So we must create an artificial stability, and that is what bracing is all about. When you look at the spine, we can think of it like a radio tower. I'm going to put up a graphic on the screen to explain what I'm talking about. When you're talking about a radio tower, a large radio tower, they have what's called guy wires. These guy wires attach to the radio tower and are pinned to the ground, and they come out in a concentric circle, much like much of the musculature that comes off of the spine, trying to keep the spine in line, trying to keep the spine upright, especially through athletic performance. So the activation of these muscles isn't just breathing in the abdominis rectus or the anterior abdominals. It has to be a 360 circumferential activation in order to protect that entire cavity. And when we talk about bracing, we're taking that cavity, filling it with negative pressure in order to facilitate the stiffness of that cavity. And this helps keep the lumbar and the thoracic spine in a good neutral position, which is the best position to prevent injuries. And then it also helps athletic performance. When you brace and you brace properly, you're able to lift more weights, you're able to lift more weights efficiently, you are able to perform athletically on a much higher level than if you didn't have proper bracing techniques. This is a big reason and a big misconception of why lifting belts are used. Lifting belts do not directly protect the lumbar spine. There is equipment that you see in warehouses that is used in this manner. However, when we talk about lifting belts, they go around and they're made of stiff materials because we are using that as a proprioceptive tool in order to press against to create better tension in a circumferential manner. So breathing is the baseline, the activity, and then bracing is a natural extension of that and helps create rigidity throughout the thoracic and abdominal cavities, and it protects the spine from possible injuries. Okay, here's my assistant, and what a lovely assistant she is. So what we're going to be doing is just having her breathe normally. I would like you to just go ahead and take some deep breaths for me. Now, as you can see, when she takes these deep breaths, these are not diaphragmatic breaths. She has to work on them as well. When you can see that the shoulders are rising, there's a little bit of tension in the neck. These are the accessory muscles that we were talking about that lift the rib cage up in order to create more vacuum space in the lungs. So if we were doing an athletic endeavor, an aerobic exercise, even an anaerobic exercise, this would be highly appropriate as far as a body mechanics perspective is concerned, because it allows us to over-oxygenate in order to perform better. However, for activities of daily living, for anxiety, this is something that can also help with diseases such as COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, as well as general well-being and athletic performance. We want to talk about diaphragmatic breathing. So on a real life person, the diaphragm is going to be right here in this general area. And like I said before, that it splits both the abdominal and the thoracic cavity, and we really want to figure out how to activate that. The research definitely shows that diaphragmatic breathing is super important for daily health as well as athletic performance. And now we're going to go into some simple drills that will help my lovely assistant, be able to diaphragmatically breathe and to breathe correctly no matter the situation. So as you can see, we have Kim in a position that brings her legs up into a 90-degree angle. The reason that we do this is to take pressure off the hip flexors in order to relax the abdomen as we move through this exercise. And what the whole point of this is to use tactile feedback in order to facilitate diaphragmatic breathing. So normally, non-diaphragmatic breathing starts up here in the chest area, and what we're going to do, go ahead and relax your hands by your side. What we're going to do is just put gentle pressure on her chest, and then we're going to ask her to breathe up out of her belly. So we're going to have her relax, fill her belly up as much as we can. Here's my other research assistant. We're going to have her fill her belly up as much as she can. And we're going to start with a little bit of tactile feedback here. Say press up against my hand and relax. Just keep breathing. Push up against my hand. Try not to lift this hand. Good. So now diaphragmatic breathing is not just the activation of the front of your abdomen. We also want circumferential activation. So what we're going to do is have her breathe and fill up my hand to the side on the lateral aspect. And then we can even sneak our hand back here and have her breathe into the floor. Now, once she's able to do 3 to 4 repetitions of this without my hand having to be on giving tactile feedback on the actual diaphragm, we can lift our hand off of her chest. And now, as you can see through this simple drill, she's able to diaphragmatically breathe. Obviously, if you do not have a partner that's able to give you feedback, what you can do is grab a dumbbell. I'm going to let you place this on yourself. And it's giving that same tactile feedback, weighted tactile feedback on the chest in order to facilitate the activation of the abdomen in order to activate diaphragmatic breathing. Oxygenation will help you in the long run in order to sleep better at night, and this kind of diaphragmatic breathing is something that happens to aid relaxation, lowers cortisol levels, and helps people sleep. And again, all of this is down in the description box. You can also read in my paper. That is diaphragmatic breathing. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about proper bracing as an extension of diaphragmatic breathing. This is one simple drill that will help you understand what diaphragmatic breathing is, help you get repetitions in diaphragmatic breathing, and help you build that longevity in your daily activities, athletic activities, and mental and physical well-being. All right, I'm here once again with my lovely assistant, and we're going to demonstrate bracing and why it's important. The reason that I had her put on her belt is because it gives a better visual representation of what we talk about when we talk about bracing. It's a little hard to translate on camera, but giving her something to brace against is going to be a much better visual representation. This is an activity that should be practiced without a belt. It is an activity that should be practiced in all of your athletic endeavors, and we're going to talk about what it means with the best visual example of her having a belt. So what I'm going to have her do is I'm going to have her step into the middle right here, and as you can tell, this belt is circumferential. It moves all the way around her body, and it is made of thick leather. And when she takes her proper diaphragmatic breathing and pushes out, you can tell that right here, and then if you look around the side, go ahead and lift your arm, and lift your arm. You can tell she's pushing out up here. So this excess skin, go ahead, do it again. She's pushing out against the belt and creating that nice brace around the middle that you can't push in, okay? Come around this side. Now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna zoom out. She's gonna perform an air squat I want you to go ahead and loosen the belt first. And I want you to do it with no brace at all. I just want you to squat down and squat back up as quickly as you can. Let's try it one more time. Okay, now what I want you to do is do the same action. I would like you to turn to the left, and let's see that without any breathing or bracing at all. Great. So let's go ahead and have you turn back this way again. Go ahead and tighten your belt. And now I would like you to move into a braced position. That diaphragmatic breathing, bracing, and now perform the squat. You can tell how much more stable she is, how much more stability she has in her shoulders. They don't move around as much. Her torso is able to stay more upright. Go ahead and move to the same direction that you were. Go ahead and do the same breathing and bracing. Do an air squat. Perfect. As you can see, breathing and bracing, even though they are distinct, they work in concert in order to create the best position in order to perform athletically, and not just that, but the safest position in order to perform athletically. You can tell the difference when she squats with no brace and no diaphragmatic breathing versus when she performs the diaphragmatic breathing and the proper brace. This translates into athletic performance and safety, which is important for the longevity of the lifter as well as overall general health for the lifter. So now that we have breathing and bracing, what we want to talk about now is exercise selection. And proper exercise selection is something that is going to affect your athletic ability long term. And the reason that we focus on the big compound movements, the squat, bench, and the deadlift, over a long period of time is because they are the most efficient. They're the most efficient for the lifters, they are the most efficient for the lifter's time, and they are the best at hitting multiple muscle groups in order to build strength, build hypertrophy, build muscular resistance, endurance. They are the catch-all for being able to essentially perform a good strength program, regardless of your goals. If we try to recreate the squat, bench, and deadlift using nothing but accessory and isolation movements, it would take way too long per session. The lifters would become fatigued, and you're more likely to draw overuse injuries because of the number of muscle groups that you are actually trying to activate. The first one that we're going to be talking about is the squat. The squat is performed in a variety of different ways, but the squat that we're going to look at is the traditional barbell back squat. The reason why the squat is so useful and so dynamic, there are so many different variations that can be used in order to accomplish different goals. The barbell back squat is able to do a huge variety of these different goals based on your different loads, your different volume, different intensities. You can also add things like tempo work or pause work in order to accomplish whatever different goals that you have in mind. It's just endlessly variable. Is a great overall exercise that has a concentric and eccentric phase, and it is applicable to almost anybody, especially anybody that's interested in strength training. It translates well into real life. When you are older, most of you would like to be able to sit down on a toilet and be able to get up without assistance. This is one of those basic human movements that is going to be very valuable, not just in your athletic performance, but in your day-to-day activities and for your health. So what we're going to do now is bring on my lovely assistant, and she is going to follow some simple cues in order to set up for the barbell back squat. The barbell back squat is going to be performed by my lovely assistant here, and as always, safety is going to be key. As you notice that we are lifting in a power rack that has safeties. She is also a intermediate level lifter that has plenty of experience underneath the barbell. Please consult a physician before beginning an exercise program, and make sure that you get expert guidance to make sure that you are performing these movements correctly. With that in mind, what we're going to do is take up a proper position in order to begin this exercise. and that starts with hand placement. The easiest way to decide hand placement is to put out your arms and then walk forward towards the bar until you can grab the bar. Some shoulders might not be mobile enough for this in order to properly hold on to the bar. If you need to widen your grip, that is perfectly natural and normal. And then if you can bring your grip in closer, that is fine too. There's a great variation that happens with this. Once you have your hand placement set, go ahead and duck your head under the bar. Now there's a couple different areas that we can place the bar on a barbell back squat, and we're going to show this graphic right now as far as where the bar can be placed. The difference being between a high bar and a low bar setting. A high bar approach is more appropriate for someone who might have limited shoulder mobility, a longer torso, is more interested in hypertrophy of the quadriceps. The low bar positioning might be for someone who is looking for more sports performance, to be able to lift as much as possible, as it generally allows more force production. Either one, depending on your goals, is something that can be accomplished and is worthwhile to be able to practice. Kim has a low bar stance because that is what she is most comfortable with, and when you are starting to move into this first position, what you want to do is have your feet directly under you. You don't want to have a split stance. Go ahead and show a split stance. Move your foot all the way back. So you don't want to have a split stance or a runner stance in order to start. You want to perform the squat out of the rack almost as a half squat for safety's sake, because anytime that you have a barbell on your back, you should treat it as a loaded barbell and do the proper breathing and bracing techniques that we just went over. So now that we have our feet set, now that we have our hands set, what Kim is going to do is, in order to activate her back muscles, her lats, she's going to pull down on the bar and pin that bar into place. That is going to keep the bar in place on her shoulders. They're actually on her rear delts right now, rear deltoids, and she's going to take that proper breathing and bracing position. And once she does that, all she has to do is stand up a little bit, and now she has unwrapped the bar. Now, in order to properly step out safely, it's a 3-step process. What you're going to do is take a quarter step back with whatever leg you prefer, another quarter step back, and then one final quarter step in order to set. Try not to settle your feet as much. That is wasted energy, expended energy, and also puts you on an unstable footing, which makes the movement unsafe. Now that Kim has found herself in a stable position, she is going to reenact the breathing and bracing in order to, you shouldn't be holding your breath throughout this entire movement, in this entire movement pattern. You should be taking a fresh breath in between each set, or in between each rep or two, depending on how athletic your muscular endurance is, or aerobic activity is. So now that we have Kim set here in this position, to initiate the movement, what she's going to do, you are looking to put your hip into flexion as well as your knees into flexion. They should happen relatively at the same time. The hip flexion is going to be the most important part, so that's the one that I would like for you to concentrate on as you move through this movement. The knee flexion will follow shortly after, and what you are trying to do is you're trying to achieve a parallel from the hip crease to the top of the knee. And we're going to demonstrate that, and then we're going to talk about why we want to be hitting parallel. So Kim, go ahead, take a nice breathe and brace, and then come back up. Let's go ahead and do one more. Nice breathe and brace. And come back up. Now, in order to reverse the movement, what you're going to do is go ahead and rack, take a couple steps, make sure that the barbell is seated in the proper position, and then simply step away. The reason that we're trying to get to parallel, 2 reasons. One, it's safer on your knees. Your knees are designed to go into that deep flexion, and it's only through our sedentary lifestyle that we lose that ability. And when you have a weighted barbell on your back, getting into that nice stretch reflex helps you accelerate out of the movement as well, and is a safer movement on your knees. Weightlifters generally have a lower instance of knee injury, and they tend to squat very, very low over a longer period of time. So the worry over squatting too deep for your knees is a fallacy, and squatting to depth is actually better for your knee health over a long period of time. The depth that we are trying to achieve is parallel, and this sort of movement is really great for warm-ups, for cool-downs. You can use it in a hypertrophy program, you can use it in a strength training program. It's an all-around great general movement. It is something that is fundamental for human movement, and it's something that everybody should be able to do, not just with a barbell, but also with body weight. And that is part of the progression, is going from body weight squat, possibly goblet squat where we're holding the weight in front of us and we don't have a loaded barbell, to a loaded barbell, and then beyond. For an overall general strength training regime, you're looking at the barbell back squat as the gold standard for squatting movements, and something that should be done with practice, and should be done with care, and should be done with vigor in order to build strength, build muscular endurance, and to build hypertrophy. The next exercise that we're going to talk about is the bench press, and many people think that the bench press is not a compound movement because the focus is on the pectorals and the triceps as far as the prime movers of the bench press. And to a certain extent that's true, but that's also true of the squat, where the prime movers are the glutes and the adductors. That does not mean that there are not elements of a full body compound movement that occur with the bench press, especially if done correctly and done safely. While some variations of the bench press have you have your feet up or not braced against the ground, the traditional bench press does have your feet braced against the ground. It's that bracing that creates an archway from the head and shoulders all the way into the feet, into the ground, that makes this a true compound movement, and part of the big three compound movements that we have been discussing. And the reason that we want to include this is because while the squat is a lower body focused exercise and the deadlift is a whole body focused exercise, we also want to focus our attention on the upper body in order to create a full body experience for strength and a well-rounded program, because upper body strength is just as important as lower body strength, and especially in a holistic sense of building these programs out. So we're going to talk about proper positioning on the bench. The bench is by far one of the more technical lifts, and definitely should be done with either safeties or spotters readily available. Because the bar is directly over sensitive areas like the head, neck, and chest, accidents can happen, and we want to make sure we mitigate the risk of an accident happening. The deadlift and the squat, because of the positioning of the barbell, they are not as dangerous and not as technical of a maneuver than the bench press. That's why we want to take special care that we are properly informing you as to how to do this lift, so you can do it safely, you can do it effectively, and it can be included in your strength training program. Alrighty, we once again have our lovely assistant Kim, and she is going to be helping me demonstrate the proper bench technique. So as you can tell, we have a flat bench, we have our half rack, and we also have our barbell. Again, safety is key. I am here in case that she somehow fails any of these repetitions, or there is some sort of accident. I always encourage you to lift with a partner, or at least have the safety set, because no matter how experienced you are, accidents can occur, and being trapped under a barbell is never fun. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and put her in the proper position. She is going to lay back on the bench. Now, when we talk about creating an arch, there are some sporting avenues such as powerlifting, where the greater arch can reduce your range of motion so much so that the force production to lift the bar isn't as much. This is a sport-specific technique, but when we talk about arching in the bench press, it is a general health aspect. There is a general health aspect to it as well. If you were, go ahead and bring your arms straight up and in front of the bar. Now, if you had no arch at all, you were lying as flat as you can into the bench, go ahead and make a bench, bring it down, yep. So as you can see, there is a limited range of motion. How does that feel in your shoulders?
It's tight. It's
tight. What that means is there's an impingement that happens because of the way the glenohumeral joint is activated, and you can go ahead and relax. Glenohumeral joint is activated and the acromion interact. If you just lay down flat on a bench and you try to bring your shoulders back into retraction, that impinges and can cause long-term shoulder health problems. So what we're going to do is have her depress and retract her shoulder blades, and that, go ahead and do that same action again. Go ahead and lift your hands straight up and then bring them back down. Yep, moving through that motion. You can tell that she has an increased range of motion. How does that feel?
I went further for sure.
A lot more stable, she's able to get a lot more range of motion. That means the impingement isn't happening as much with this new shoulder position. So what I want you to do now is go ahead and put your feet on the ground. So as you can tell, she has her feet braced against the ground. If I try to move her leg, I'm not able to move her leg. That is part of the compound movement, the full body process. Now go ahead and get a proper bench position as far as grip. So the closer you are, the more activation of the triceps and the chest muscles that occur. So we want a fairly neutral grip, a little bit wider than her shoulders. So bring it out, keep going, right about there. So this is a little bit wider than her shoulders, and it's going to give the best activation of the chest and triceps without focusing. She's going to be able to focus on using her lats in order to stabilize this movement. She's going to be able to focus on using her legs, as opposed to making this an isolation movement where she brings her hands in closer together and she is using just her chest and triceps in order to perform the lift. So just like before when we talked about the squats, we want a good bracing position before we start. So she is going to brace, breathe, take that nice diaphragmatic breath, get that proper brace, and then she's going to unrack the bar. Now, she is going to bring the bar down to her chest in a controlled manner, and she's going to press back out. Now, as you can tell, go ahead and keep doing repetitions, and I'll talk a little bit. As you can tell, her elbows are not excessively flared, and they're also not very close in. She's at a nice 45-degree angle in order to facilitate that good shoulder health over a long period of time. And as you can tell, she is not losing her brace at the bottom of this movement. She's not relaxing her brace. She's coming, pausing, and then lifting through the movement, through the concentric portion of the exercise. And then go ahead and rack. So when she's doing this, when she's doing this movement, yes, it is a chest and tricep dominant exercise. However, it is a compound movement because of the inclusion of your lower limb, in order to facilitate bracing into a proper position. Now, with safety, we do want to have your shoulders retracted and depressed in order to create that good tracking to avoid the impingement from your acromion and your glenohumeral joint, and to be able to lift safety over a long period of time and create upper body strength, endurance, and hypertrophy. The last movement pattern that we're going to be talking about in this series is the deadlift. The deadlift is the most efficient movement that you can possibly do. It has the most activation as far as muscle groups are concerned. It is one of the few true tests of how strong someone can possibly be. This is because of the nature of the lift. There is no stretch reflex, there is no gravity you are fighting simply against gravity in order to lift the weight. The squat has a stretch reflex that happens at the bottom in order to propel you out of the bottom of the squat. The same thing with the bench press, where you have a stretch reflex, more potential energy that happens as you bring the bar down. There's potential energy with the stretch reflex in order to press the bar up off of your chest. However, with the deadlift, because the name that implies the deadlift, it is coming from a dead stop. There is nothing but your pure strength to be able to get it off of the ground, and then relatively strong, and then you need to be relatively strong in order to control it on the way back down for the eccentric part of the movement. So this is primarily a back exercise, activating the lats, latissimus dorsi, but the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the gluteus, the gastrocnemius and soleus, the latissimus dorsi, the rhomboids, shoulder muscles, and as well as the pectorals are all activated during this movement exercise, and that is why it is one of the more taxing exercises, and it is also one of the most efficient exercises when using this in a strength training program. So we are going to demonstrate how to safely do the deadlift. I'm going to bring my lovely assistant out one more time, and we're going to talk about proper cues and proper lifting techniques as far as the deadlift is concerned. So when we talk about the conventional deadlift, the proper stance is actually going to be standing straight, and what we want to do is get the bar, your feet are going to actually be a little bit closer together than you would with the squat. That is because you do not need to leave room for the femurs to move in the acetabulum joint in order to get depth like you do with the squat. So you're able to provide a little bit more power by bringing your feet a little bit closer than shoulder width apart. This is the conventional deadlift. In the sumo deadlift, you would actually spread your feet all the way apart, and you would find a comfortable position, and then your hands would actually go inside of your feet. However, with conventional, which is what most people should start with, your feet are inside of your hands. Now that we've got a good position as far as feet distance, we want to approach the bar, and the way that we approach the bar is to find your midfoot. Your midfoot should be under the bar, and throughout this entire movement, we should be moving ourselves around the bar, not moving the bar to us. This is going to help us create a good starting position and to be a little bit more efficient when we get into that starting position. So finding the midfoot, if you are wearing shoes, you're going to use the third eyelet of your shoe in order to find that midfoot. That's usually a good cue in order to find it. If you are not wearing shoes, then obviously you can use your midfoot. You're going to just simply look down. You're going to place the bar over your midfoot, and then that should put you in a good position as far as starting. So when you're looking for how to place your hands, the same principle applies as far as your hands are concerned that we did with the squat. You're going to hold your hands out like a zombie, and that should be a good starting position. Go ahead and reach down and grab the bar. As you can see, that's a pretty comfortable starting position, and go ahead and stand back up. It's a pretty comfortable starting position and a good basic position. It may need to be adjusted. Some people have a little bit more body mass or a little less body mass, so you might need to widen the hands or bring the hands in closer. It really depends on your personal preference and what is best for you as an individual lifter. Now that we have this good position, we have our good hand position, we're going to start into the starting position for the deadlift. And that is going to start with bringing your shins to the bar, taking care not to press the bar forward. This is going to put us in a good position as far as starting. So go ahead and bring your shins into the bar. And this is our other laboratory assistant. Now that you can see, her shins are toward the bar. She has a good grip. Her back is generally in a flat line. She's not too far out in front of the bar or not too far back. Her glutes, her butt is not tucked in underneath. She's able to generate enough power to be able to lift. This movement starts by activating the latissimus dorsi, and the way that we're going to do that is you are going to think about, the cue for this is you're going to think about squeezing grapes in your armpits, and what that's going to do is you're going to pull back, you're going to bring your chest up, and your head follows your body, so you're going to bring you're going to face upwards, and you're going to get your nice breathing bracing position. So you might need to kick your legs back out, raise your butt up, nice breathing and bracing, come back into it, and then you're simply going to stand up and you're going to hinge at the hips, fully extended, and then slowly move it back down to the ground. That is a deadlift repetition. It starts at a full stop and ends at a full stop. As you can tell, the extension in the hips, in the knees is simultaneous. And then you simply reverse the movement in order to perform the eccentric part of this movement. This is one of, if not the key movements as far as strength training is concerned. It's incredibly important to perform for hypertrophy, for strength training, for muscular endurance. The applications, there are some variations for specific purposes as far as more targeting the back, the posterior chain, the glutes, the hamstrings. However, the conventional deadlift should be a staple of any strength resistance program. It's just too efficient and activates too many muscles to be ignored. It can be performed safely if you follow all of these cues and you create that proper breathing and bracing. It is something that strengthens your back and does not have a negative effect on your back. The reason that people talk about these negative effects is because the exercises are performed inefficiently or improperly, and it can put strain on to your back, just like squatting can put strain on your knees, just like benching can put strain on your shoulders if it's performed incorrectly. If you perform these movements correctly, they actually strengthen the muscles that surround these joints and create more padding and more ability for that part of your body to resist injury over the long period of time. It promotes general well-being, it promotes long-term health, and resistance training also helps build a more dense skeletal structure. This is especially important for females like Kim. As you advance in age and you go through menopause, osteoporosis is one of the #1 causes of bone degeneration in older females, and building bone density through resistance training is incredibly important, and starting from a young age and building as much as you can in order to help stave off osteoporosis after advancing in age is incredibly important in the long term. So now that we've gone over the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, what we're going to do now is we are actually going to pivot to the idea of proper programming for all of these different movements, what that would look like, what the different volumes and repetitions and sets would possibly look like depending on what your goal might be. We also want to talk a little bit about the different sorts of periodization programs that are available, and what would be appropriate for a beginner, intermediate, or advanced lifter, and why that would be. So now we're going to transition into the next part of the video where we talk about programming. All right, the last thing that we're going to be talking about is programming, and for all intents and purposes, programming is about managing load versus fatigue. When we talk about load, we're talking about intensity and volume. So intensity is the amount of weight that we are lifting, and volume is the frequency at which we are lifting that weight. So if you wanted to, you could do nothing but 30 repetitions of each exercise that you were looking to do right in a row, and call it good. However, it is difficult in order to progress for that due to fatigue, because the load management simply isn't there when you're talking about doing all the repetitions in a given training session all at once. That is why we break things into sets and reps. And as a coach, it's important to understand what is appropriate for each of your lifters and why you are doing each particular set and rep prescription. The most basic and beginner-friendly use of programming is what's called linear periodization. So you have your time and your intensity, and for a beginner lifter, they are going to be starting with almost no time and no intensity. This happens because they're either detrained, so you might have a detrained athlete that has taken a long period of time off of lifting, or a complete beginner that that is beginning a strength training program. But you would not want to try to put them at their run repetition max, or do a lot of volume or intensity with them, because they are detrained. That increases the odds of injury, and they will fatigue fairly quickly. So when you're looking at linear periodization, it's essentially what you think it is. It is periodization that moves in a generally straight line upwards, increasing the intensity over a period of time. A good example of this is the 5x5 program. Essentially, you do 5 repetitions in 5 sets, and you increase the intensity each week, and you should be able to do this for quite a long period of time. New beginning lifters and detrained lifters go through what's called a period of neuromuscular facilitation. So the neurons and muscles are starting to work together in order to perform the exercise more efficiently. They aren't actually getting stronger physically, they're just becoming more efficient at the exercise. So once you reach the point of diminishing returns, where the strength, the actual true level of strength has been hit, you're going to find that linear periodization is no longer going to be effective. You're going to reach a plateau. You are no longer going to be able to just add 5 to 10 pounds each week onto each of these lifts. You're going to have to get into a different management system. When you're talking about a different management system, the other one for advanced and even expert lifters is what's called an undulating periodization system. These can be daily undulating periodization, weekly undulating periodization, and essentially what that looks like, undulations as in waves. So you increase intensity and then you lower intensity. Then you increase intensity and you lower intensity. You increase intensity and you lower intensity. And as you go through this program of peaks and valleys, you should have a general trend still upwards. So essentially all programming should be linear in the sense that you should be on an upward trajectory. However, over a shorter amount of time, you may have to back off the intensity to be able to manage fatigue, to prevent injuries, to work around injuries. And this undulating periodization is most appropriate for lifters that have some experience, that are at the level of their where their true strength is. Strength is a difficult thing to build upon. And it usually comes slowly after the period of neuromuscular facilitation. PRs or personal records don't come as often and aren't able to be added onto every week as the athlete becomes adapted to this load. There is one final one that we talk about, and it's called conjugate training. And this is very popular with different power lifters as well as a lot of college athletes. And essentially you are training some lifts at a very high intensity, but you are also training submaximally for a lot of your accessory work. These maximal lifts are done in conjugation with these submaximal lifts, so you are not detraining during the downward time of the periodization. You always have a high intensity, but it's managed with a high intensity or a lower intensity of athletic training down here. So you keep the athletic training down low, that way you are always athletically prepared in order to do the lifts, perform the lifts, and then you have a very high intensity here in order to garner as much strength as possible using this very high intensity. It is very fatiguing as you are doing both concurrently. There is very little in the way of deloading or bringing the weights and intensities down or the volume down. You are constantly at a max in one area and then working submaximally in another area. So those are the three basic ways. There are endless combinations and variables for each of the training. Some people may need more variations on their exercises. Some people may need less variations on their exercises. Each of these things is very individualized, and there are some good templates as far as general strength training tips and tricks. However, finding something that works for each individual athlete is going to help their long-term lifting. Keeping them interested and engaged is super important when it comes to the longevity of the lifter. And if someone is bored with the program that you are giving them, then they are less likely to follow it and are more likely to give up or seek something else. So proper programming is really about structuring the load and volume over a long period of time in order to manage fatigue and to avoid any long-term injuries. To kind of wrap everything up, these are the elements that create a good, cohesive and holistic strength program, from breathing to bracing to compound lifts to programming. All of these things combined increase the chances of success as far as your goals, whether it's strength, hypertrophy, muscular endurance, or a mix of all three of these. There is an endless variety of ways that you're able to perform these exercises in different ways in order to accomplish different goals. Ultimately, these are the primers that have to happen in order to create a baseline for accomplishing those goals. You have less of a chance of injury if you do these movements correctly. If you are breathing and bracing correctly, you have different health effects as far as reducing anxiety with breathing, helping chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. You are able to reduce anxiety, help you sleep better, help you perform athletically better with breathing. With bracing, you are in a more protected body stance that protects your spine, your thoracic spine, and your lumbar spine. It helps fill in the gap as far as your abdominal cavity, of which there are no bony structures to protect the lumbar spine. And proper exercise selection will help you in a global sense, make you more efficient in the gym, and help manage fatigue better, as well as get the results that you want. You put all these things together and you have a holistic and comprehensive strength training program that will last you for a long period of time, hopefully for the rest of your life. Hopefully you become lifelong lifters after this. Again, please look down into my research down below. I encourage you to read my analysis of different studies. This is how I came up with my conclusions, and all of the studies that I used and reference are all in the description down below. I want to thank you very much for watching this video. I want to thank you very much I want to thank my partner Kim for being my lovely assistant during these training exercises. I would also like to thank my professor, Professor McClinon. She's been invaluable in guiding me through the process, not just as a senior, but also through the process of being a Bachelor's of Arts in Exercise Science. And through that major. I'd also like to thank St. Martin's University. It is where I've definitely found my home, and it has helped me grow not just as a student, but as a coach, and looking forward to leaving scholastic life and helping to impact people on a greater level. And I know that a big part of that is part of the lessons that I've learned in my time there as a student. So with that being said, my camera is about to die, and again, my name is Scott Drapo. I'm a senior at St. Martin's University, and this is my senior thesis. Thank you very much.